The NFL offseason is a time where teams try and get better to not only build their roster for the upcoming season, but their future too. And while there will be teams that do this offseason, and teams we take a look at in a few years of how they really turn the course of their franchise around with a couple of moves here and a couple of moves there are teams that will do the opposite, or in some cases you could say, have already done the opposite. They will be paying the price over the next couple of months and years for that matter. And because these teams will be limited as to what they can do, they're going to be stuck in this gray area of not mediocrity, but underwhelming. And you can certainly make a case the three teams we are going to discuss in today's video are in three of the worst positions in the NFL. And there is a lot to dive into with each and every one of them in today's video. And without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing the New Orleans Saints, and when you take a look at the Saints roster before diving in, you may say, okay, they have some good pieces like Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, Chris Olave, and think they may take the NFC South in 2023 and use this as a stepping stone and rejuvenate the success they had in the late 2010s. And I guess technically they could, but this roster specifically from a salary cap standpoint is a mess. And I mean a mess. For starters, they are over the cap by $46 million and have a ton in guarantees to players that are truly insane. And why they ever guaranteed this money to all these players for what they are as players is baffling. For starters, 8-time Pro Bowler Cam Jordan will play the 2023 season at 34 years old, is guaranteed nearly $23.5 million. As in, that's how much is guaranteed left on his deal. And they can't cut him because his cap hit is $25.6 million this year, meaning they would only save $2 million to cut Cam while spending $23 to do so. And I included him in a video last week as a potential trade candidate, and this is why. And if you have a 34-year-old player making this much money, sure, one contract like this is fine, it's not great, but for a future Hall of Famer that's been there for over a decade, it kind of is what it is. Alvin Kamara also has a bad contract, and this goes into the discussion of why you should not pay running backs, but he will account for $16 million in 2023, and they cannot cut him either because he has $19 million guaranteed left on his contract. So it would be a profit of negative $3 million to cut Kamara, and what this means is if they cut Alvin, he would account for $19 million against the cap in 2023 for the Saints, despite not playing a down for them. That's two ugly contracts, and it gets worse. I won't go through all of them in detail, at least not to this extent, but Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, Michael Thomas, and especially Michael Thomas's contract are all players guaranteed $10 or more million in 2023 from the Saints. And my question here, especially for the Taysom deal, why? Why were these guys given these huge deals? Michael Thomas is one I understand, as his contract was signed all the way back in July of 2019, and he was coming off of a truly historic start to his career, but has been disappointing since. And the worst part for the Saints is they can't cut Thomas. There's still $26 million guaranteed to Thomas, and he has a cap hit of $13 million this year, making him, like Alvin Kamara, uncuttable. Now, for Saints fans wondering, he will be cut next offseason, but he will not be this offseason because they quite literally cannot afford it. If they cut Thomas, the $46 million over the cap they already are that we mentioned at the beginning would balloon to over $59 million over the cap. And the only thing I can see the Saints doing to try and protect themselves is, of course, restructuring or trading players in an NBA style where they give up a pick along with this. Because nobody is going to want to trade for a 28-year-old Alvin Kamara, who regressed this year, by the way, and is pending a legal situation. Nobody wants Taysom Hill at $14 million per year with over $23 million guaranteed. There is no trade market for these guys, and especially not Michael Thomas, who has one of the worst contracts in the league. But wait, there's more. They don't have their own first-round pick this year because they traded it to Philadelphia last year so they could get a second first-round pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. They do have one from the Sean Payton trade to the Broncos, to be clear. However, it is from the 49ers, and it is at the very end of the first round. Are they going to be competitive in the NFC South in 2023? Sure, but beating the Falcons with Desmond Ridder in Week 6 in October is different than playing Jalen Hurts or the 49ers defense in January, and the Saints are nowhere close to competing for a Super Bowl, leaving them in this area of both mediocrity and below average, and I don't think Dennis Allen is a long-term solution at the head coach position either. Next up is the Arizona Cardinals, and this is not going to be a segment of shitting on Jonathan Gannon, the new Cardinals head coach, as much as it is to acknowledge how much of a hole he and GM Monty Ozenfort have to dig themselves out of. Speaking out loud for a second, I think there is one thing we can agree on with the Arizona Cardinals, whether you are a fan of the team or not, and it's that the roster is not talented. Sure, they have some players here or there, but overall it's a bad football team. You don't finish with the third worst record in the NFL by accident, and out of any of the teams selecting in the top 5 at the draft, I think the Cardinals are in the worst situation. And I truly believe the best way Arizona can get out of this hole they are in is by trading down in the draft. We've seen it work for teams like the Eagles and even for teams trading stars like the Seahawks, who now have a top 5 pick because of the Russell Wilson trade. Not to say every draft trade works out that favorably, and even if Arizona did not receive a trade offer they liked, such as one involving a 2024 first at minimum, drafting either Will Anderson or Jalen Carter to kickstart the defense and be the first draft pick of the Gannon and Ozenfort era certainly would not be a bad consolation prize. What genuinely stinks for the Cardinals is they are heading into the 2023 season with a lot of it being over before it starts because of how much time Kyler Murray is going to miss. And admittedly, I'm not the biggest Kyler fan, but there is no denying he gives the Cardinals a better chance to win than anyone they will bring in as a free agent. I also don't think Kyler is an elite quarterback by any means, and I don't ever see a scenario where he goes into San Francisco and wins a playoff game, which furthers the point of them being in one of the worst situations in all of football. The Cardinals had to pay Kyler, because if they didn't, what were they going to do? Were they going to tread water and hope they hit on a quarterback, or hope they find a Carson Palmer type player several years later? They, in a lot of ways, were handcuffed. And him being hurt was one of the worst things that could happen, but even if the injury did not happen, this team was not going to do all that much in 2023. The Cardinals and the Raiders are in very tough situations because they play very good teams in their division, and it's either try and get big with them or rebuild and essentially try again in a couple of years. And in the Cardinals' case, they play the 2021 Super Bowl champion Rams and the 49ers, a team that's been to back-to-back NFC championship games for a quarter of their schedule. And Seattle is a good team too. So this isn't just a 2023 exclusive problem that the Cardinals are going to attempt to answer this offseason. Kyle Shanahan is not going anywhere anytime soon, at least we don't anticipate that. And when teams are meeting about how to improve the roster, they often talk about how they can become division champs because that's the first step to take to win a Super Bowl. And the Arizona Cardinals are about a million miles away from winning the NFC West. From Arizona to Kansas City, we go to discuss Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. No, I'm kidding, of course. We're going to Northeast Ohio to discuss the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland, like New Orleans, has quite a bit of money allocated to players' guaranteed deals for the upcoming season. Of course, we all know about Deshaun Watson's contract, which was a 5-year, $230 million fully guaranteed deal. Deshaun has a cap hit of nearly $55 million in 2023, which takes up about 21.8% of the team's salary cap alone. Myles Garrett has a hit of $29 million, and Myles being paid that much is simply business. The rookie scale contract does not last forever, and Myles is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. He has back-to-back 16-sack seasons and has 74.5 career sacks since being the #1 overall pick back in 2017. In terms of building a team through the draft, Miles is everything you hope for and more when you were on the clock with the #1 overall pick. Amari Cooper has a hit of $23.8 million, and between Watson, Myles Garrett, and Amari, these three players alone account for nearly 42.8% of the Browns' cap space in 2023. And the franchise trading 3 first-round picks for Deshaun, along with the fully guaranteed contract, will probably set them back years. And I say probably, not for sure, because there is a chance Watson plays well in 2023, but even in the scenario he does, I don't think you can justify everything they gave up for him. Not to say Baker Mayfield was the team's long-term answer, but Baker went into Pittsburgh, big brother, and won a playoff game. And over the course of Watson's career as a Brown, do we really think he will win a playoff game at some point in time? Granted, the Browns' defense played their asses off in that game, at least from a turnover standpoint, and it was by pretty much every definition a team win, but the question of Watson ever winning a playoff game stands. Hell, do we think Watson will ever lead the Browns to the playoffs? Cleveland has just 2 top 100 draft picks this year, and I highly doubt this team goes from 7-10 to winning multiple playoff games in the span of 1 year. Firing former defensive coordinator Joe Woods will help some things, as this team gave up a fourth quarter comeback to the Joe Flacco-led Jets in Week 2 of all teams. But the question, or the problem that I have with the Browns, is the same question I asked to the Cardinals, and that's how do you beat the Bengals or the Ravens, the 49ers in the Cardinals case. And before any Browns fans comment, well, we actually beat both of them in 2022 if you looked before the video, I would be more specific and ask, how do you beat either of these teams in their stadium in the postseason? Because I think it's a reasonable assumption that the Bengals or Ravens will win more games than the Browns in 2023, meaning one of those teams will win the North. And when you make a trade like the Browns did to acquire Watson, specifically the 3 first-round picks part, you have to have great players on a rookie deal or have to be coming off of a draft class like the Jets or Seahawks just had in 2022. For as great as Myles Garrett is, he is their pass rush. It's him and him alone. The Browns were one of only 2 teams that did not have a second player have 30 or more pressures, and the other was the Chicago Bears, who finished with the #1 overall pick. And there's plenty of other holes on this roster too. I don't think they're the most stable at the receiver position, and I like DPJ quite a bit, but are they going to pay him 16 or 18 or whatever he commands per year when the time comes? I just don't think this team was at a position where they should have made this trade because of all of the holes on the roster. To a degree, I respect going all in, but it's kind of like sending a 100-meter sprinter out to compete with the guys running 5 or 10K races. Yes, the Browns are going to improve their roster this offseason, along with everyone else, but I think they are in a no-man's land gap, and that's one of the worst positions you can be in the NFL. And that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it would mean the world and help a ton. And until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.